Minor keys are a popular choice for songwriters, and it's easy to see why. Whether writing a heartfelt breakup song or a dark metal song, the obvious choice is the minor key. But minor keys aren't just a one-trick pony. They can also offer an array of unexpected brightness. This makes them a really versatile key for crafting songs with. At this point, it's worth noting that there are actually 3 minor scales, and when people say minor, they're usually referring to just one of these, the natural minor scale. The notes from this scale are then used to create the chords in the minor key. I'll link a video at the end of this one if you want to learn more about this process. You will commonly see minor key chords written out in Roman numerals. These are used to show you the function of each chord in the key. That means how it works and how other chords interact with it to create different sounds for your progressions. The Roman numerals are universal. They are not tied to any particular minor key and can be applied to the key of your choice. Here are the 7 chords you find in minor keys. Uppercase Roman numerals represent major chords, lowercase are for minor chords, and the diminished chord is a lowercase with a small circle or degree symbol next to it. If we take the C minor key, which I'll use for examples later, then the following chords are used for each of the numerals. 1 is C minor, 2 is D diminished, flat 3 is E flat major, 4 is F minor, 5 is G minor, flat 6 is A flat major, and flat 7 is B flat major. These are known as the diatonic chords of the key of C minor. Like a game of poker, you can play these chords in different ways to create progressions. Most of these are straightforward, what you see is what you get. But the beauty of minor keys, there are also some bluffs that you can try out. So let's look at the ways we can play the game of minor keys. The simplest idea is just to play some combination of the 1, flat 6 and flat 7 chords. These all work well together and are used widely in popular music. The blend of the minor tonic with the 2 major chords gives an element of brightness, but there's definitely a feeling that we aren't in a major key here. Here's a few different arrangements in the key of C minor. You can take this idea further and add the flat 3 chord to the mix. This means you are using 3 major chords, with the single minor chord being the 1 tonic. This gets us about as far away as possible from the idea of the minor sound. It is undoubtedly positive, but has an underlying tension or menace that keeps it interesting. For this reason, you'll find the following 1, flat 6, flat 3, flat 7 progression all over popular music in many different genres. A word of caution with the flat 3 chord. If you hang out on the flat 3 for too long, it can start to draw the ear towards it. Without reinforcing the minor 1 chord as the tonic, the flat 3 takes over and establishes itself as the new major tonic. This is due to something called relativity. This is a great starting point, but what if you want to start writing some more varied minor key progressions? Well, the simplest way to open up chord possibilities is to use a 4-chord loop formula. Chord loops, or turnarounds, are the workhorse of popular music. You'll find them everywhere, especially in choruses. They are a set number of bars, usually 4 or 8, and the location of certain chords in this structure means that they work as a small unit which can be repeated as many times as you need. Although they appear limited on the outside, having some constraints like this can free you up to try out all of the chords in the key and see which one fits your song. Here's the initial formula for the 4-chord minor key loop. Start on 1, then play 2 more chords before ending on flat 7. Feel free to try any chord out in between. For example, you could try 1, 4, flat 6 and flat 7. Or maybe rearrange and see what 1, flat 6, 4, flat 7 sounds like. You can also repeat chords in the loop if you want. For example, moving back and forth from 1. If the 4-chord loop starts to feel a bit limiting, then you can open it up a bit by changing the final chord. Two other choices are available, the minor 4 and the 5 chords. Feel free to experiment in the same way with the two blank spaces in between. You can take these components of the 4-chord loop, starting on 1 and ending on flat 7, 5 or 4, and break out into longer progressions if you want. It all depends on what serves the song you are writing. Here's an example of this in the key of C minor. So far we've only been playing our minor key chord progressions openly and honestly, using just the diatonic chords. But now it's time to bluff. As I hinted at earlier, minor scales come in different flavours, and this means they can easily be manipulated in different ways to create different sounds and effects. The main bluff you'll see used extensively in minor key songs is to bring in a chord from outside of the key, that is a non-diatonic chord. This chord is the major 5 chord, also known as the dominant chord. For example, in the key of C minor, the 5 chord is usually G minor. In this case, we would play the G major chord instead. Another way to think of this chord is as a borrowed chord. We have temporarily borrowed it from another key to use in the minor key. If you're familiar with chords in the key of C major, then you will know that G major is the 5 dominant chord, which creates a strong cadence that pulls you back to the 1 tonic. When we bring this into the minor key, it will serve a similar purpose. It creates a much stronger sense of drama and tension than the minor 5, and when you resolve to the minor 1 tonic chord, it has a greater sense of resolution. The reason for this is the notes, or one particular note, in the chord. I've mentioned G minor and G major, so let's look at the notes in each chord. G minor is constructed with the notes G, B flat and D, whilst G major contains the notes G, B and D. Moving that one note up half a step brings it right next door to the root note of the scale, which is C. This is called the leading tone in the C major scale, and is the reason why this major 5 chord has a much stronger pull to the tonic 1 chord. To experience this, have a listen to the chord at work when simply moving from 1 to major 5. It also transforms the 4-chord loop formula we used earlier. Give it a go by ending with the major 5 and feel the strength it brings to continue the loop. For example, here's a popular idea which is also known as the Andalusian cadence. Major 5 is often used with just the flat 6 and 1 for a popular and powerful sound. For example, even though we've been using the major 5 chord, it doesn't mean you have to ignore the minor 5. It can actually be a really powerful idea to use both versions of the 5 chord to provide contrast and drama. For example, here's the previous 4-chord loop, but with both 5-chord flavours. Listen to the added interest that this brings. So far I haven't used the diminished 2 chord, but you are free to give it a go in the 4-chord loop if you want. Whilst diminished chords are extremely rare in major keys, they do crop up a little more in minor keys. The most likely way you'll see them played is in a 2-5-1 progression. 2-5-1s feature in major keys and are a staple of jazz music. In minor keys it involves the diminished 2 chord and that borrowed major 5 to create a dramatic flourish of a progression. Here's an example in the key of C minor. Minor key progressions can be used to create whole songs, but before you do that, you need to fully understand where the chords come from and what their functions are. I've created a simple system that explains all of this, and you can learn it with the video on screen. Watch that now to master the dark arts of minor keys.